Hi, Richard. Welcome back to the podcast studio.
Hi, Paco. Thanks for having me back.
It's great. It's been a while, eh?
Yeah, always a pleasant surprise to be invited back to this. Normally, I always think that the last one I've done will be the last one that I've done, but you keep getting me back on again.
No, because you started something different, right? I mean, we don't call it podcast anymore when you're here. We call it postcast.
It's a postcast, right? That's right. Yeah. Special.
It's absolutely great. So we are together with two guests. Maybe you can introduce them.
Yeah, I'm glad to. Yeah, no, this is. So I'm really pleased to bring along with me today Lesley and Mark from Ergonomic Solutions. So we've got an interesting discussion lined up for today, talking about particularly, obviously we're talking about retail, touching on hospitality as well, but I think particularly we're going to be talking about security and accessibility in retail. So that's I brought in, as I say, a couple of the experts from the industry to help us out with it.
Yeah, absolutely great. And I think it's the first time that we have 4 people, right, in the studio. And we always have some people in the screen, but the first time that we have.
This is a record, isn't it?
It's a record.
It's the most we've ever had.
The most you've ever had.
Now we need to tell
really
that.
Pleased to be here.
Exactly, we need to prove that we can do it, right? And it's great that they are right, between us, so they cannot escape, right? So we just managed to block them down. Okay?
The door is locked, right? Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about that, let's say, a retail phase that we have been discussing, very often in the market. There are a lot of opportunities in the market to develop. One of those which might not be the most evident one, because it's not strictly related to a technological development, but is in fact linked to that, is the ergonomy, the accessibility, and how is this impacting us as a consumers, as a shoppers, but also how it's impacting our market, where the opportunity is. So I think you mentioned before, Lesley, that 70% of shoppers expect to the store environment to be as technologically advanced as their everyday life, correct? And
absolutely. I mean, I've worked in retail and IT for the last 30 years. Retail has changed drastically in that time. I know, I don't look that old.
Look like that.
Retail has changed drastically. Years ago, you could walk into a store, you picked up an item, you went to a checkout, you paid for it. Now consumers expect the experience in the store to be similar at home. Everybody's got laptops. You expect to go into a store, to be able to look up items, to go up to kiosks, to interact with screens, to do self-checkout.
Correct.
Fundamentally, retailing has changed drastically. These days, I could go into a store. I tend not to use it. I could go into a store with my phone and I could walk in. I could not talk to a single person in that store, not interact at all. I can scan all the items on my phone. I can pay for it on my phone and walk out.
Sometimes that's nice, right? Sometimes you just don't feel like talking to people, right?
Yeah, but it's probably not good for the retailer if you think about it. They want to be interacting with me to encourage me to sell more. They would argue they could talk to me through my phone, which is probably not a good way of doing things. They probably want to be interacting with me by advertising things on big screens. They probably want me to go up to things and interact with technology so that they can encourage me to spend more money. And believe me, I'm more than willing to spend more money. As Mark will tell you, I love shopping. So for me, that's probably not a good way of doing things. The ideal is probably somewhere in between, where I can go in, I can interact. I can be looking at things on a big screen. I can be interacting with kiosks. I can be using self-service or whatever other technology is there. And that's better for the retailer. It's just a better experience for them. It's a better experience for me.
They're catering in different ways to different people, aren't there? Some people, and even the same person on different days. Sometimes you just want to go into the shop, get what you want, and get out again as quickly as possible. Other times, other people want to,
absolutely,
want to spend a little bit more time. They want to, maybe that is for some people the main social interaction of their day in some cases.
So I think the technology has been changing also because the behavior of the people, I mean, you are just a good example of that, is changing, through the past years, but also there is a certain need to change. There is a certain need for technology because also there is a European directive, being made or already developed, to ensure that all this goes in the right way. So I'm just wondering, Mark, maybe you can help me with that, is the directive there because the behavior has changed, or is the change of the behavior which is driving our authorities, to develop a directive which is going to be impacting us very, very heavily?
Yeah, Mark, what exactly came first? Was it the chicken or was it the egg?
Now this is a podcast.
Exactly. That's the non-Spanglish kind of way of explaining that, right? So,
No, I think it's the behaviour that's driving the directives and the change, right? And you touched upon it there, right? And a term that gets used a lot is frictionless, right? But frictionless is actually also a choice, isn't it? Because how Lesley would like to shop compared to how I would shop, how you would shop, Richard, how you would shop, Paco, it's all potentially slightly different. And a retailer has to manage all of those, be able to manage all of those different options or decisions, choices that the consumer has, right? And what you see is more and more customer-facing technology, right, from a self-service perspective. And that's not just self-checkout. Self-service is broader than that. So, as that changes, there's a whole piece around how we as consumers, we're all different shapes, sizes, different able bodies, disabilities, ages, and how we interact with that technology. So, there is an EU directive around accessibility. It's sort of come into place now.
Yep.
It will become legislation by 2030. And basically what the EU have outlined is a range of sort of directives of best practice that the different member states need to comply to. How those member states and countries there implement is down to their
So this is
local
basically
decisions.
to ensure that disabled people with with different needs in the store have got access to the technology there. So
different needs.
So, but it's not just...
It doesn't mean only disabled, right?
Exactly that, right?
It can be tall people like me,
it can be short
who
people.
are not always
It could-
accommodated
but
properly.
also the elderly, right? These things need to be intuitive. So some of this is around the
like
physical...
Paco.
Come on now.
Thank you.
Come on now.
I love you too.
So some of this is around the physical installation, right? And the location of the various pieces of tech that people need to use, right? Some of it is also down to the interface, right? The application itself. How easy is it to press the buttons on a touchscreen, for example? Can you reach it if you're able-bodied or in a wheelchair potentially?
How big
right?
those buttons are as well. I think you mentioned before,
precisely,
Mark.
right? And then you've got the physical space around, which also has a massive impact in terms of the, I remember when we first started doing, when chip and pin, as it was called when it first started, right? First came into play. This was all about, okay, so this is a new piece of technology that the customer actually has to interact with to manage the checkout process, right? So where that pin pad or chip and pin device is located has a massive impact on the flow through of the checkout. That is all about the experience as a consumer of your shopping experience, how quickly you can get through that checkout. If the technology is shifting to self-service or self-checkout, that mindset needs to be the same, but it just puts a different aspect on it, right? Because it's unattended potentially, right? So it's got to be intuitive, right, to use. It's got to be accessible physically. So, and with the EU directive, I think it's by 2030 these things have to be in place, and technology that's not accessible has to be replaced by that point as well. So there's a big shift here, but I'm not too sure everybody's fully aware of it. This moment.
I think it is. It's not something that I was as fully aware of as I've become since we've been talking about it over in preparation for this. But I think not only does it have to exist, but it's also got to be usable for people. It's got all this. If the technology that's supposed to create a frictionless environment is actually creating friction itself, then it's
fairly counterintuitive. Right?
It's got to obey the law, which will be a law by 2030, and it's great when the government brings in laws that mean that people have to purchase more technology. Good for us, good for the industry, and obviously good for the good for the consumers, the people in the stores as well. But it has to work. It's all got to work together. It's got to be frictionless.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's all about making. Lots of technology is being put into stores now. It's just the way things are now. So it's about making sure that everybody, whether they're tall, short, disabled, able-bodied, has equal access to that technology, and that it benefits everybody by putting that technology in there. And there's things that people can be doing now. You don't have to wait until 2030. There are little simple steps that you could be doing now that makes your store more accessible to everybody. And that's really where we can come in with some of our solutions to help out. That's what our solutions are designed to do.
There are two ways of looking at that, right? We mentioned before that. I mean, one thing is what you want to do because you want your customers to have a great customer experience. You mentioned, hey, you are a tall woman, so of course you have your specific needs, that needs to be, and that also is an influence in your in the way that you experience your shopping, right? So you need to do that not to lose the customer. But we are talking about directives, about accessibility, which are going to be imposed. So if you don't take that, it's not that you're losing an opportunity, which you are, by the way, that is also that you're going to be punished.
I think that, there's definitely exactly right. Because there's two sides to it. One is there's the directive there, so you will have to do it by law within the next 7 to 8 years. The other side of it is that disabled customers have £80 billion worth of spending power for retailers. So it's if you're not, you're missing out on a huge market if you're not making retail stores, restaurants, hospitality outlets accessible to everybody.
Correct. And I think we are not talking only about customers. I mean, because we all are suffering, shortage of employment, of employees, not employment. In fact, we have too much employment that cannot be fulfilled. But, also to have a good, nice environment to work, it's a key element to retain the talent, to retain people in the shops, which is a major trouble in this moment.
It's a major problem at the moment. And I think since COVID, every sector is experiencing lack of resource. And I think recent studies have shown that decision makers have recognised that by putting technology in, not only are they satisfying their customers and encouraging customers to come back, but it's also a way of retaining staff. People would rather work in a technologically advanced environment. It's more satisfying for them, so it's a really good way of retaining the staff.
It's more satisfying for them, but again, this all boils down to customer experience, right? If you're a valued employee, you take pride in what you do, you've got the technology to actually enable that customer experience more, whether it's on a personal level or through the technology, right? These things aren't isolated, right?
The one feeds off the other.
Precisely. Yeah.
If somebody feels that because of the environment they work in that they can give good customer service, that gives them more satisfaction. They're more likely to hang around. That results in them giving better customer service to their customers. The customers are more likely to come back.
Yeah, a lot of it's like access to information, isn't it? Really, because especially if you've struggled to get staff or to keep staff, and you've got somebody that's maybe young, new, inexperienced. If you're giving them technology that gives them access to information about products and services that your outlet sells or provides to customers, then obviously you're not only empowering your staff, but you're also enabling them to give a better experience to their customers, right?
Exactly. And when you talk about accessibility, and I touched upon this earlier, right? Traditionally, it was a manned checkout lane or a manned counter, right? And that flow, had a massive impact on the person operating the checkout, because if they're not comfortable in what they're doing, their service level is going to drop to the customer, right? Those principles in the trend of self-service, self-checkout, they're still there, right? But it's more focused on a much broader piece of the population because it's unattended, it's the consumers using it, right? And so where you've got, traditionally we've seen big integrated self-checkouts as the big push on self-service. You see more and more.
Typically in supermarkets.
Yeah, more and more types of retailer, even fashion and everything, looking at, different modular types of self-service systems or self-checkout systems.
Correct.
And that creates massive opportunity in terms of serving the customer requirements, the customer need, but also how that technology is implemented becomes, you've got so many more options because it's modular, because you can upgrade things, because you can change things, right? How you position it. And you see in fashion, a traditional POS all-in-one touchscreen mounted on a wall with a payment device and a counter because there's got to be enough space to pack the goods, right? All of a sudden, that's a self-checkout.
Yeah, that's all you need, right?
And you're using traditional POS hardware
They've
the
probably
software,
already got that hardware, right? They're
exactly.
probably,
The
Absolutely.
software application is different, obviously, but the physical hardware is the same, and that creates opportunity in terms of, you know, we're big focus on sustainability. Everybody's got that at this moment in time, but the opportunity to potentially repurpose existing technology.
You don't mean don't buy new technology?
No.
That's-
We all
I'm not
want
sure if
this.
No,
We
Mark,
all
you
want
mustn't
this.
say that to Richard. Richard
I'm not
wants
sure if
to
I can
sell
get fully
more
on board with
technology.
this.
Oh, no.
That's,
Yeah, are you sure we have invited the right people to the podcast? Right?
shut the podcast. Close.
But think about the opportunity, though, right? Because, you know, the retailer will have a focus on this, right? Especially at the moment, right, where every retailer is focused on bottom line, right? And if they can repurpose some of the tech, there will be additional technology that needs to go in,
Right,
Richard,
yeah.
right?
But
To
there's
make
always
it, to
something
turn it
new.
into a
Yeah.
self-service.
Exactly, but
I'm back on
think,
board.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. But I think, of course, we can make a joke about that. But it's not really about you don't want to, let's say, replace technology, or you don't want to incorporate new technology. It's about this is happening. I mean,
Yeah.
this is embedded in the mind of the consumers. You know, let's recycle, let's work on the circular economy, let's reuse as much as possible. So I think the angle is different. It's like this is going to happen. What part can be an opportunity for me as a reseller, as a VAR? You know, how can I be part of that which is happening and I cannot influence? I am not going to be stopping the world to stop recycling or something like that. Right? So,
No, how can I, as a reseller or a VAR, how do I get involved in enabling that repurposing?
Correct.
Right? And some of that is software, some of that is additional peripherals, some
Correct.
of that may be reconditioning, right? There's service that, you know, there's additional security things that need to come into play. So there's potentially cameras, right? Tablets that monitor the what's going on in that self-checkout zone or that self-service area, right? Or so the amount of tech potentially going in is more than we've seen traditionally.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
It's powerful
yes.
stuff that as well, because you know, I've some of the self-checkout solutions that we sell, they've got a camera built into them, and all the camera's actually doing, it's not even necessarily recording anything. It's just playing back video of you using the self-checkout, and the very fact of you knowing that there's a camera watching you doing that, even whether it's recording you or not, it keeps you honest. Not that I need a camera to keep me honest, right?
I always smile.
Truth out now, Richard. Come on.
You always smile.
There are people that will, you know, that will use, you know, will bend the rules of self-checkout to. In fact, I started having a bit of a look into this because I thought, well, you know, maybe it's an outlet for theft, or clearly it's an outlet for theft. But there's actually people are different categories of people that I hadn't even thought of are in different ways potentially taking advantage of self-checkout, and this is something that retailers and technology providers to retailers need to be aware of, and need to make sure that they are being careful of. So there's obviously there's new types of offenders. So individuals maybe who first steal goods by accident, they get away with it, you know, not on purpose, but they accidentally put something extra in their bag and get away with it, and think, well, if I can do that, then maybe that can happen again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, but I think that happened always, right? So it's like it's really like I mean, you're not going to be changing the people, right? People is going to be trying to cheat, trying to theft. So there is no change in that. The only question is that we have an opportunity to make this more safe, you know, safer,
That's right.
and really try to put some value into that technology that can help also the retailer to be more efficient.
That's right. I mean, you've got switchers who'll swap labels on goods, so they'll change expensive.
How do you know, Richard? That,
I've done thorough research.
He's researched
a
this.
personal
hasn't he?
research, right?
It's going to be a knock on the door after this podcast,
absolutely.
right?
I'll be when the podcast finished, I'll be selling knockoff goods to everybody. Yeah. Switchers who change the labels, and sometimes they don't even see themselves as criminals. They just think that they're
They're playing the system.
That's right. Yeah.
They feel like
yeah.
Robin
But I
Hood.
think people have you'll always get a dishonest element, and like you say, it'll just change over time. So that's where the retailers will have to adapt to the different types of theft that's going on. So that's why you might have cameras in different places, or there might be some sort of different technology that comes into play. There'll always be some sort of opportunity to put something in place to stop whatever the latest scam is.
And a lot of it is, it's not necessarily you mentioned before, attended or unattended. There's a very much a blurred line between the two. So you've got, certainly in between there, you've got semi-attended. So it's not self-checkout and you're entirely responsible yourself for making sure it's done correctly. There's an assistant there, whether they're, whether it's an assistant looking after 8 or 10 checkout lanes, or even just 2 or 4 lanes. There's somebody there making sure that people are using it properly. And I think that in itself is one of the main ways that you can introduce self-service technology and still maintain security, because you've got one person in terms of 4 self-checkouts instead of 4 people running 4 individual POS lanes.
And if you think about that, that's better for the customer who goes in to buy things because you feel you're in control. But it's also better for the store associate, whatever you want to call them, because it has to be more satisfying to be doing that type of job where you're watching what's going on and manning, say, 4 tills than just sitting there scanning stuff through. It's about job satisfaction. So that's more likely to retain people than if they're stuck on an old-fashioned checkout. So it keeps everybody happy.
Absolutely. So I just would like to go back to one of the concepts that you have been addressing, okay, which is the repurposing of the technology.
Absolutely. I mean, we've done a few projects. The one that comes to mind, a French fashion retailer, where they've taken a traditional POS all-in-one touchscreen, and it's been wall mounted. Next to that is a pin pad, right? Yep. Wall mounted. Yeah. Next to that, a traditional receipt printer, wall mounted. Yeah. Now, not all of that is going to be repurposed, right? Some of that could be, it could be the touchscreen, could be the pin pad, could be the scanner, right? It could be any element of that. And I think we all have a responsibility in sort of reusing as much technology as we possibly can, right? Correct. At this moment in time. And the opportunity there is around, okay, so I've got all of this technology that used to be in a POS environment, traditional POS environment.
A traditional checkout.
Yeah. Now, as a reseller, how can I add value to the end customer? I mean, sort of saying, right, I want to use that, some of the elements of that hardware again. It needs a software upgrade.
Fundamentally, it's the same stuff, isn't it? It's the same technology.
But then you've got, how do I... The beauty of repurposing that kind of hardware instead of an all-in-one, big kiosk or big self-checkout is the fact that you can change it. Right, yep. You can swap it out. There might be a legislation change, and you need to change the pin pads. You might need to swap out the
bigger
touch screen or bigger touchscreen. Right. So keeping that modularity, keeping things configurable, that is where the reseller channel adds value, right, to that retailer.
Correct.
And how do you put it on the wall? How do you put it onto a kiosk floor stand? How, where do you put it?
Only there was a company that could
imagine that, Richard,
and that
ergonomically offer solutions for that. Yeah.
And that's exactly where we come in. Right. So with our new kiosk systems, you can take those existing bits of hardware. You could simply put them on the wall, or you could put them on a counter, or you could put them on the floor. The fact is, it's modular and it's customizable. And that really is where the resellers and the VARs come in. That's the bit that they can do. And that's really adding value to the retailer.
And plus there's a software opportunity there for them as well.
And there's a big software opportunity. Because at the end of the day, that's the bit that makes it all work.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, without the software. I mean, that's probably the biggest difference between point of sale, traditional point of sale and self-service, is that one's being used by a trained operator, the other one's being used by, a member of the public who may not be all that tech savvy necessarily.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's really important to get that customer interface right.
Definitely, yeah.
And don't underestimate the amount of work that is required there. And that's where it comes back to all the accessibility stuff. There's a big play around accessibility as well. You want anybody to be able to interact with that screen, for example.
But let's also remember, a lot of the conversation we've just had there was sort of geared towards self-checkout. Yeah. Right? Self-service is is a lot more than just self-checkout. So, you click and collect, or curbside as the States call it, right? The endless aisle piece, ordering online, and then you come into the store and pay. So, where that technology gets, we're back on the accessibility, but also the physical space a little bit, right? So where's the most sensible place for that technology to go? This is all where the reseller community adds value into the retailer, right? And
Absolutely.
then is that all of a sudden I've got to put a piece of POS hardware onto some shelving, right? How do I do that?
Correct.
Yeah, and this is all around. This is what accessibility means, right? And then
It's not a threat; it's an opportunity. At
It's
the
an
end.
opportunity.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because no retailer, no retailer, no reseller is going to be changing the habit of the consumer. So you better adapt, and you better take the best out of that, and you better, let's say, use the opportunity to sell something that they are demanding, right? And I think this is the message behind.
Yeah.
I think part of the issue is that everybody thinks self-service, it conjures up images of something that's really complex.
Yep.
And it could be something as simple as taking a screen on a standard checkout, positioning it somewhere on the end of an aisle,
Yeah.
just that screen for informational purposes.
Correct.
That's self-service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Or it
adding
could-
a scanner and using it as a price checker.
Exactly.
Or something. Yeah.
Yeah. But it can be as complex as you want or as simple as you want. And that's really where the reseller comes in. They can add the value around what the solution should actually comprise. They can do the solutioning, the installation, the software.
Yeah. And this is also what I like from that, but we were mentioning before, that the habit of the people might be changing. Some people might be having the same habits before, but I think the main change is that the people has got a choice, we were mentioning also the elder people example, when they are going to shop, maybe they are shopping in the same way they were shopping like 50 years ago, but you have now much more choices. And in those choices, it's also where the opportunity is, right? It's like, okay, some people, some market niche will want to have self-checkout. Some people will want to have simple informational screens. You were also talking about your example with the phone, going with your phone and things like that. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, but the choice that the people has got today is influencing also the opportunity that the people is finding, right?
And the key thing is you want to be able to address all of those different types of customers.
Correct.
I mean, I'm the sort of person, because I've always worked in IT
Yeah.
and retail, I go in and I deliberately look at the different ways I can do things.
Correct.
So the most tech-savvy way is to go in with my phone, scan everything on my phone, pay on my phone, walk out.
Yeah.
But I'd also like to go in and have that choice. I want to go through a self-checkout
Yeah.
if the mood suits me. I might want to order something at home and go and collect it in the store. And then when I'm in the store collecting it, I see some sort of big billboard advertising a special offer or something like that. And then I might go and buy something more traditionally. So I just want to know that all those different avenues are open to me. And that's the challenge for the retailer, is making sure that they provide all those different opportunities.
And not only that, the fact is that because we are providing different kind of technology for different kind of consumers.
And for different kinds of
Yes,
retailers.
but
as
there
well.
is a moment,
Absolutely.
Richard,
Yeah.
that we need to connect all that. And this is also one of the key elements that is happening right now.
And that's the opportunity, as you said earlier, Paco, for the reseller channel, right?
Yeah.
There is so many for the different retailers, the different consumers, the different amount of technology that's available. Because it's not all about repurposing, right? There is new technology.
Yeah.
There's much smarter,
Good.
larger, touch screens that
Yeah.
need to go in. Accessibility as well. How easy it is to press the buttons, right?
Well,
There's
let's
a lot
face it.
more 32-inch screens, right? That are going to be customer facing from an order kiosk, information kiosk, whatever it may be. So it's not all just repurposing. You'll
No.
be pleased to hear.
I'm
And
very
depending-
pleased to hear that. Yeah.
Depending on the retail, some retailers want things to look quite sexy, and the only way you can make them look sexy is by putting the new ultra slim, nicely curved stuff in place.
Yeah, I mean-
so it's not all about repurposing.
Yeah, a lot of old POS hardware looks a little bit old and
does.
tired, doesn't it, these
Bit
days?
clunky.
And I don't want to name any names. I will name names if you want me to name names. I'll name them. But I think we probably know.
I mean, if you see me every morning, you will think I'm older than what I am. So, of course, I'm refurbishing myself every day, right? So,
It's repurposed Paco.
repurposing Paco, yeah.
But also you see the multi-purpose in terms of the technology, right?
Correct.
Because it might be that it's used as a kiosk, right? Which means in my
Correct.
mind, kiosk, there's some level of interaction. But when
Correct.
that's not being used, right, and it can be used to send the digital signage type messaging, marketing messaging into the stores, right? When that can be in a small store or large store. So you don't want that on necessarily a traditional 15-inch
No,
POS screen, right?
you're right.
That needs to be on the bigger
Bigger.
one. Yeah, that enables you to do that.
So sometimes it might be, the same thing, one thing at one time and another thing at another time, and that's one of the beauties that you can do if you're mounting a point of sale terminal on a pole, is that you can turn it around, so you can, the operator can use it, and then at other times
Correct.
it's the consumer can use it as well. The shopper
And also,
can use
also
it.
let's face it, not the newest technology is always the best solution, right? So, I mean, repurposing technology means also that you offer a different kind of service to people, and maybe you are offering a more accurate service to the people, right? So you were mentioning before the example, of the personal shopper, personal shoppers. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. But they were using a better technology, in fact, or more advanced technology from the customer experience point of view, years ago, and still. The self-checkout is far away from that was happening 20 years ago. So
Very true. I mean, I was selling personal shopper systems 25 years ago. In lots of ways, it was very much ahead of its time.
Yeah.
This is like self-scanning.
The self-scanning, you go
Correct.
out, you pick up the little device and you do the scanning as you go round, and you check out sort of through a hybrid standard checkout.
Yeah.
That was way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Very successful. But there are some retailers who are now, 25 years later, only just installing that.
yeah,
And to me, personally, I prefer that to self-checkout, the traditional one when you go through and you scan everything at a till.
I like self-checkout. I'm a big fan of that. I like that.
There's-
It's like playing shops, isn't it?
Some people love it, but believe me, I love going in and trying to break those systems as well. But the personal shopper system, you probably can't break.
yeah.
But as a sort of the type of shopper I am, I just like to try out all these different technologies, and you just work out what works for you. And for some people, like you were mentioning, your mother,
Yeah.
she'd probably never like that technology, and there will always be people like that. So that's why a retailer, and hospitality out, they need to cater for the different people who are going in and buying things,
Definitely, yeah.
and that's not going to go away.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the self-checkout then, Richard. I mean, because you're a special lover of that, right? I mean, how is that evolving? Because honestly, we all, let's say here, have seen self-checkouts already 30 years ago, right? And it has been taking really a long time really to go there. So the consumer habits have been changing. The customers are more mature now. So it's happening, but it's still not happening as wide and as massive as we could have imagined, as we expected, especially when everything started to launch, right?
I partially agree with you, Paco, but I do also think it's becoming a lot more widespread, and it's been used in a much.
I'm talking about the small retailers.
Yeah, I
Of
think,
course, in the big tier one, no doubt. But
Yeah.
why is not going down so fast?
I think it is starting to happen there, and I think it's starting to happen more and more frequently. We had a customer of ours sold some self-checkouts into fish and chip shops recently. They were getting really busy in the school holidays straight after the pandemic, because a lot of people were going to, it was in a tourist area, a lot of people were going there. And I think before that you would say, well, self-checkout, self-ordering in hospitality, in the big burger chains and places like that. I think that's, people are used to using that. But there's no reason why you can't have a version of that in a fish and chip shop, because it's fundamentally doing the same thing. It's managing the queue. It's making sure that people aren't waiting too long for it. It's actually making people feel as though they've got a little bit more control over the ordering process, and it's finding the right technology. Fundamentally the same technology, but maybe it's a smaller screen, maybe it's wall mounted instead of floor mounted. You've got to make sure that self-ordering kiosk fits the existing format of the fish and chip shop, rather than a restaurant being purpose-built around 6 large upright kiosks. But it does the same job, and it fits in there. And we're definitely seeing more and more of that across, particularly in hospitality, but also in small retail as well. Even some of the supermarkets are putting in more smaller self-checkouts, because they don't. I think people are conditioned to expect that there's some form of security in there. There's weighing scales, there's cameras. So I think people know that the technology is advanced to a point that you can't cheat it as easily as you maybe could when it first came out, and you could pretend that a can of beans was pretend that a 6-pack of razors was a can of beans. Now, I think people know that you can't break the system. So even though a lot of that technology has been removed for the smaller self-checkouts, people assume that it's still there, because we've what to expect from a self-checkout system. So it's a really interesting time for it, and it's one of the fastest growing areas that I'm seeing in technology going into retail and hospitality at the moment.
And to pick up on your point, the big hospitality outlets will have big screens, and that's what their self-service offering revolves. And I mean big screens. Yeah. Something like a fish and chip shop or somebody that's smaller, they don't have to implement a massive screen like that.
Correct.
You could do it on a much cheaper 15-inch screen, or you could do it with a low-cost tablet.
Yep.
It's you can create whatever you want. It's still self-service, but it doesn't have to be the most expensive of technology.
That's a very good point, in fact, Lesley, because one of the breaks, it was always like the return of investment, of making such an investment, for a big retailer was obvious, because they study any single minute that the customer is spending in the cash, or the employees are doing that. But for the smaller fish and chips shop, that's not so obvious. So the fact that it's not really, or there is a space to work, in terms of return of investment, of course, is a big help. It's a massive help to introduce this technology, right?
Exactly, and I think that just the sheer amount of technology options there are to be able to configure a self-service system. Yep. That's you've got the consumer behavior that's driving that change, but the technology options now is so much broader than it was to enable that kind of thing. So self-service can be scaled from a fish and chip shop to a multi-lane hypermarket, right? Yeah. It really can.
And that's where our business comes in. So we have installations where we're dealing with 55-inch screens, or there are smaller implementations which might just have a very small tablet. And we like to think that by making our systems customizable and configurable, we can handle any of those different options. So that gives the retailer the option of choosing whichever components they want, and you can create a self-service out of that, whether it be massive or whether it be quite small. It's still self-service, and it's still trying to achieve the same objectives. Absolutely. And that's why, by offering the flexibility that we do, we can help these retailers. So by definition, help the VARs and the resellers and the ISVs in solutioning what the retailers want.
Yeah, correct. So I think that's also one of the points, right? Most of the time, sometimes the VARs, the resellers, they want to understand by themselves the market, but I think is a message from both from Blue Star and of course from Ergonomic Solutions. Hey, if you have an opportunity, if you have a doubt, if you have a question about, we can help. We can help you to see where the opportunity. We can give you examples of similar situations and how we have been solving those.
Bring us your problems, and we'll find it.
Ask Blue.
Bring us your technology problems.
Ask Blue.
Ask Blue. One of the biggest things was, from a traditional POS, what we always used to say is we help solve those headaches, right? How do you implement new technology into existing checkout furniture, right? That's now gone broader. Yeah. Right, because it's how do you put existing new technology into an existing store format? Yeah. Right,
anywhere in the store.
And that's a big focus for us in terms of where we're going and where we're trying to add value to the reseller channel. Right,
absolutely. We've been touching a few things, which I think are key in this changing of the face of the retail, and I think we've been talking about European directives. So we are, in a certain way, we all, as an industry, we are forced to implement things, big opportunity. We've been talking also about the self-checkout. There's how is this evolving, what is it going, what is it coming from? A huge also opportunity. Big opportunity that I was not aware is the reuse of the technology, which also offers, instead of a threat, a good opportunity. But I wouldn't like to finish without asking. I mean, you as a company in Ergonomic Solutions, you have the access to most of the big projects which are happening around these installations worldwide. So I would like to understand, what is the biggest demand that you are seeing from the market. What is the main question that the potential customers, the end users, are bringing to you? And that is a question. Sorry, is my Spanglish maybe? That was meant to be a question.
I mean, I think what we are seeing, the majority of what we're seeing at the moment, you still get the traditional stuff that people want to do, but increasingly it's around self-service. People say, oh, you keep going on about self-service. We're doing that for a reason, because that is what customers are looking at.
Correct.
That is where they really can see the opportunities for them to improve the way they interact with their customers.
Correct.
Introduce technology in a store in a way that's not threatening to anybody. It's not threatening to the store staff. It's not threatening to the customers. And that is just the way, it's fact. That's the way the world is going now.
Yeah, I mean, I think self-service is one element of it, right, as well, because I used the term we mentioned earlier, this whole frictionless store environment and everything. So, coupled with the self-service, what you've got is you've got your traditional POS, point of sale, you've got your self-service, because every shopper wants to shop differently, right? And there's various elements of self-service, self-checkout, traditional manned POS, and then you've got the digital signage coming more and more into that now, right? And I don't think, if you're looking at that holistic store environment, you can't take any one of those three elements in isolation anymore, right? Because, the content that's coming from, or the data you get from your point of sale, from your self-service, drives the marketing content that's coming out through the digital signage, right? And all of these things are in a holistic view of the whole omni-channel experience, if you like, within the store. And also, the online element on click and collect, and bringing the online into bricks and mortar retailer. So those three elements, right, are what we see big retailers as well, and coming into the smaller retailers, the three things, right? POS, self-service, digital signage.
I think it was, as we've said a couple of times today, the pace of technology is changing so quickly, but budgets aren't also growing exponentially. So sometimes you just have to take what you've got and reuse it slightly differently. So I think the ability to do that is, how we together can all help technology resellers to achieve that. I think that's really really key and really useful to highlight that today. I think,
I think that's the perfect sentence to close this podcast. So I think you don't know it, but I mean, we managed to make a podcast without having Richard talking about goats, which for whatever reason happens very often, right? So
that is a first. Although you now you've brought goats up.
Yeah, because I mean,
can I just?
I was wondering why we were
let's
going.
shut it down. There,
End it
there.
Can we talk about goats afterwards?
All right. So again, Mark, Lesley, thank you very much indeed for joining Richard and myself today. I think it was very interesting, and I think we have been opening some doors, for some opportunities that the people can take or not.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very
Really
much.
enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
It's been good fun.
See you in the next podcast, Richard.
Look forward to it.